So basically, we are all very excited for your India tour later this year, and hence we wanted to interview you on that mostly. So basically,
Sure.
can you hear me properly?
Yeah, very well. Can you
Yeah,
hear me okay?
yeah, I can hear you fine.
Right.
So basically, we wanted to know that a little bit about the background stories leading up to the India gig. So basically, you started this psychedelic sound, if I'm not wrong, from the age of 15 with Altamont. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your childhood, what helped you create that kind of a sound, that kind of a music, a little bit on that.
Okay,
Hmm.
sure. Well, basically, I was introduced to music when I was about, very young, 7 or 8 years old.
Mhm.
I was introduced to music by my parents,
Mhm.
not in a not in a conscious way,
Mhm.
but simply by virtue of the kind of records that they were buying and
Mhm.
listening to.
Mhm.
And my mother used to listen to a lot of sort of dance records, like disco records of the 70s.
Mhm.
And I loved that, artists like Donna Summer and the Bee Gees and all that, and I loved that.
Mhm.
But my father would listen to things like Tubular Bells, Dark
Mhm.
Side of the Moon,
Mhm.
so the more kind of conceptual rock music of
Right.
the 70s.
Right.
So I grew up hearing this music.
Mhm.
Pretty early on in my life, I was kind of absorbing this music without even necessarily realizing
Mhm.
I was absorbing it.
Uh-huh.
And so by the time I became a teenager, I realized that actually music was something I really seriously wanted to pursue, as a career. This
Mhm.
kind of musical DNA had already formed itself, based
Mhm.
on one side with this kind of very, this interest in telling stories
Mhm.
through
Mhm.
music.
Mhm.
With this kind of form of conceptual rock music.
Right.
But then at the same time having this great love of pure pop, and loving great melodies,
Mhm.
and pop songs and dance music and music that would make people feel good too.
Mhm.
So I think that my parents very much created that musical DNA within me.
Right.
And I started off in the early 90s. I started off with a band called No Man,
Right.
which
Right.
was more on the side of dance music. We were exploring, pop and trip hop and hip hop rhythms and.
Schoolyard Ghost
also
happens to be one of my favorite albums.
Yeah. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I was also beginning to make music, just on my own, really,
Mhm.
under the name of Porcupine Tree,
Right.
which was coming more from my love of the 60s psychedelic music and the
Mhm.
70s conceptual rock music.
What books
And
or
what actually,
yeah. Tell me. Yeah.
what actually happened in the
Mhm.
long term
Mhm.
is that Porcupine Tree became a lot more popular
Right.
than No Man. So I began to get more and more involved in Porcupine Tree,
Mhm.
initially making the records on my own, but then obviously putting a band together and touring
Mhm.
the world, and probably the rest of the story you know by now.
Right.
That was really how I started anyway.
I know that you are very much fond of films, and you also wanted to make a film on Dead Wing. So if you could tell us a little bit about the books you read as a kid and the films you watched, which inspired you to make certain songs, and which songs could they be? I know Arriving Somewhere, that song, and it was about some ghost conceptual film which you had in your mind, if I'm not wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if you could tell us about the books you read and the films you watched.
Well, when I was very young, I mean, I was very lucky because I didn't really enjoy school very much, except
Okay.
for one class, which was English literature.
Okay.
And I was very lucky. I had a great English teacher at school,
Mhm.
and he introduced me to some of my favorite writers, people like Franz Kafka, Hermann Hesse.
Mhm.
I mean, I was very young, so to be reading these very, very, quite complex and quite deep books,
Mhm.
and some of them are quite surreal and quite difficult to follow. Things like Hermann Hesse, Steppenwolf, and Glass Bead Game, and Kafka's The Castle, The Trial, and Metamorphosis.
Right.
But he was introducing me to this stuff because I guess he recognized in me someone that was very curious about things that were not in the mainstream.
Mhm.
And I think that applies that applies right across the board with regard to my interest in music, and with regard to my interest in literature, and also with regard to my interest in film.
Right.
And again, most of the films I was discovering that I really loved were what you might call the more esoteric, the less mainstream films. So again, seeing things like David Lynch's Eraserhead,
right,
or something like The Exorcist, the William Friedkin film The Exorcist, or what would be another good example, or Werner Herzog films like Aguirre or Nosferatu. And I think and also Kubrick's films. I love Kubrick's films.
I know you're a fan, yeah.
Yeah, so all of those films. But I think one thing they all had in common was that they had a slight surrealistic quality, and they almost tapped into what I would call the logic of dream logic, in the sense that when you dream, the story that you tell in your dream doesn't always follow a logical path.
Right.
Now, if you watch a lot of Hollywood films, they're always very logical and they follow a very logical path, and that to me is very boring, very boring indeed. And I always love these films, like the Russian director Tarkovsky as well, where you had this almost this dream logic where things didn't follow a path that was very neat.
You are also reminding me of Ashe Andulu.
Absolutely. Ashe Andulu, Buñuel and Dali, that I saw that when I was very young, and it totally blew me away. And also some of Buñuel's later films, like Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, and those films were surrealism and absurdity, and almost like a dreamlike quality to the way the story unfolded. Those things always appealed to me more. And, to be honest, I think you see it in the music and the way, although I said at the beginning I do love great pop music, and I do, I think when I write my own music, I tend to be more interested in letting the music go in directions that perhaps not are obvious directions. So the songs will unfold in fairly unpredictable ways. The stories will unfold in unpredictable ways. And I think I get a lot of that from the movies I loved and the kind of books that I loved as a kid, for sure.
And what about your intentions of making a film out of Deadwing? Is it still on the pipeline? Is it still in your mind?
I think if I did a movie now, I'd probably write something new. I mean, I did go back and reread the Deadwing script about a year ago with the guy who wrote it, with Mike Benyon, and I think we both felt that if we were going to do a film now, we would probably write something different. Because that script is now, it's 10 years old now, and we're a bit older, we've learned a lot, we have different experiences. And we live in a very different world to the world that we lived in when we wrote that. So I think we both, when we reread it, we both said to each other, I think we could do something better and different now. That's not to say that we have done that yet, but I think it's definitely still something I would love to do. And I think it's just a question now of sitting down and writing a new script. And in fact, we looked at the possibility of adapting Hand Cannot Erase for a film, and also some of the stories that were developed for the previous album, The Raven That Refused to Sing. Right. So we're looking at other stories, and maybe there's a movie in there somewhere. I would love to think so.
And if you could tell us about a few anecdotes from the recording sessions while you were making songs like Lazarus, Arriving Somewhere, what images went through your mind while composing those tracks, and what are the stories behind those songs?
Well, those songs were written for the soundtrack to the Deadwing script. So, everything is based very much on the script. And in a way, that story was like a ghost story, and I've written other ghost stories since, but that particular story and that particular, those particular songs you mentioned, Lazarus, Arriving Somewhere, also songs like Happiness 3 from my last album,
4.5,
Space, all of these songs were written around that time, 2004, 2005, for what I thought was going to be a solo record, which would be the soundtrack to this movie, which unfortunately never got made. So, I mean, though Lazarus is pretty much the song on the album. Is pretty much only me and Gavin, the drummer, I think, playing on that track. But otherwise, it's a solo track basically. So, so that was a strange time where I was kind of thinking this was going to be a solo record, but because the movie didn't get made, it kind of ended up. A lot of the songs ended up being, on the Porcupine Tree record instead. But I mean, Lazarus is still a song I love to play, and I still think of it very much as my solo song because it was really just my song, and we still play it live and in my solo shows. It's a song I'm very proud of, very very beautiful song.
I actually wanted to know a little bit about the backstory of Lazarus, because the lines which are very touching, like "My daddy, don't you worry, this cold world's not for you." So is it more of a personal experience sort of a thing?
No, it's based on the characters in the script, and and unfortunately, I know for somebody like yourself who hasn't read the script, and most people who hear that song have not read the script. Obviously, but everyone that hears that song, it may seem strange, but I think there were characters in the main character in Dead Wing was a character called David, and David was the central character.
Okay.
And the song is from the perspective of his mother. So the person singing those lines is the mother of David, except the mother is singing those lines from beyond the grave. So she is essentially a ghost, and she's singing this song to her son, David. But I think what's beautiful about it, and of course this is what's beautiful about music in general, is that it is, in a sense, although to me it was very specifically about the characters in a script, of course anyone can hear those lines and kind of relate to them and understand them from their own personal perspective. And have kind of empathy with them. So I think that's one of the beautiful things about music sometimes, is that it has a universal quality, even when it's actually very selfish and very specific, as in the case of Lazarus.
And talking about songwriting, people in India are a big fan of your songwriting and your words, everything together, you as one entity. So they really want to know that how do you write your songs? Like, do you start with a lick on the guitar, an arpeggio, or is it triggered from a word? How does that happen, the entire process of songwriting?
Well, anything really. I mean, I can have a lyrical idea, I can have a piano part, I can have a keyboard, a guitar riff, I can have a drum rhythm, I can have a pure texture, just a sound. I can have a bass line. It's funny because this is a question I do get asked quite often. How do you write songs? And honestly, there is no rule book. Sometimes, like on my last album, Hank Cannot Erase, I wrote a lot of music on the bass guitar. I was enjoying playing the bass. A song like Routine on the last album came very much from the idea and the lyrical concept, the idea of someone dealing with the death of their children by, putting themselves into a kind of routine of washing, cleaning, ironing, and how that kind of routine can help some people to deal with some massive tragedy. So that was very much a song that came from an initial concept, an idea, and the music from that point of view was secondary. So honestly, I don't think there's a rule book, for me or for anyone.
तुम्ही ज्या वोडाफोन उपभोक्त्याला कॉल केला आहे त्याने तुमचा कॉल होल्डवर ठेवला आहे कृपया लाईनवर रहा.
Is there some cross connection?
Subscriber you have called has put you on hold. Please.
Hello, I can still hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. Carry on. Sorry, there was something else. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I finished that anyway. So yeah, I was just saying that I think there is no rules really. Songs have come from all sorts of things: film scripts, lyrics, guitar riffs, piano lines, textures, drum rhythms, bass lines. I just think whatever is the inspiration at that moment.
And we all know that about your solo projects, and they are doing really well, and we also look forward to your collaborations. But then, as you said, Porcupine Tree became very popular. So do we see you work with Porcupine Tree for another album sometime soon?
I don't think I'd ever go back to a band, to be honest, no.
Okay. Any particular reason you want to focus on your solo career, is it?
Well, I mean, I was in a band for a while, and, you know, it was fine, and I think we did what we were supposed to do. But to be honest, I got to the point where, I mean, listen, I think probably I'm the kind of person that really is supposed to be a solo artist. Even when I had this band, to be honest, I was still writing all the songs, doing the production, doing all the interviews, doing all the promotion, and I got to the point where I just thought, what's the point of being a band? Why don't I just be a solo artist, which is kind of what I am anyway, you know. And by the way, I'm not saying there wasn't valuable contributions from the other people in that band. Of course there was, you know.
Yeah.
But I think what appeals to me more is being able to work with any musicians on any song, and being able to choose different musicians and change direction much easier, and have full control over my career. And by the way, my solo albums have sold much more than Porcupine Tree ever sold. So it's not like I even have a financial motive to go back to a band because my music is selling better than ever. And so, but you know, not that would be a factor. I'm not saying it would. And I understand that in a country like India, Porcupine Tree we only ever came and played one show, so people never got to see it.
Right.
Which is unfortunate, but honestly, my show now I think is more spectacular. I still play a lot of those songs that I wrote for Porcupine Tree, and I play them with an exceptional band. So I think that the music still lives on anyway, personally. Right.
And will you be doing songs like Half Light, piano lessons for your solo concert in India when you come?
Maybe not this time, but I wouldn't rule out me doing them at some point. You know, in my solo repertoire. The thing is that I have. If I look back at my career now, I have something like 20 albums of music that I can choose my repertoire from. So it's difficult to play everything that people might want to hear.
True.
But there'll be some songs from going back to the 90s when I come and play in India for sure. Maybe not those ones.
Another interesting part about your music is like how listeners are all over the world. They keep comparing musicians and sounds. So when Porcupine Tree came about, they were like telling this is the Pink Floyd of the 90s. Does it concern you when you hear things like that? Because Porcupine Tree had its own sound, you have your own sound, and Pink Floyd had their own sound.
I don't want to be anybody's modern anything, or I don't want to be like a substitute to anything. I mean, I think people maybe I think they mean it in a positive way. Of course, they mean it in a positive way.
Of course. Yeah.
But I'm fairly ambivalent about it, to be honest, because I don't want to be seen to be living in the shadow of any other artist or any other band. I want people to say, this is Stephen Wilson's music. This is the modern Stephen Wilson, not the modern Pink Floyd.
True.
So I'm kind of a little bit ambivalent about that. I guess it doesn't annoy me, but I don't particularly encourage that kind of comparison either. No matter how flattering people may think they are being, I think the most flattering thing of all is that you simply see the music or hear the music as my music, Stephen Wilson, something unique about it.
And you last came to India in 2009 and 10, if I'm not wrong, and you came and played at the IIT Bombay. Do you remember any happy memory from that gig? If you could share, what's your last memory from India gig?
I mean, it was the first time I'd ever been to India as a tourist or as a musician, and I remember it was an exhilarating and extraordinary experience. Kind of a shock in a way, but a good shock. To come to a country where I had never been before and understand that there were so many people that knew and loved the music and related to the music was incredible. Because, you know, the thing is, as I'm sure you know, you can't really sell records or CDs in India. So at least not very many. So looking at the record sales, it was very, you know, we had no idea that there were so many people listening to the music because we hadn't sold that many records in India.
Right.
So I think it was like this incredibly positive shock and surprise that I don't know how many thousand people showed up to see us play. It was I don't think it was our greatest show or anything, but it was. I mean, the audience was incredible, and just being able to hang out and you know, and spend some time in the city and in India and was amazing. I think it was one of the last shows we ever did, so I don't think the band was really. I don't think we were at our best, but you know, it's still a very, very vivid memory for me, looking out at all those people and understanding that they knew the words to all the songs, and that was incredible to me, yeah.
Porcupine Tree became even more popular after that gig. I just wanted to tell you, because you might be interested to know that so many people turned up, definitely, and there were a lot of other people who did not know who Porcupine Tree is. But after that concert, your CDs and your music was streamed online, bought from music stores, and a lot of things happened after that gig.
Wow! Okay.
Yeah, it did happen. And if you had to work with any Indian musician, I'm sure you must be listening to a lot of Indian music as well, because Pandit Ravi Shankar had a lot of influence during the time of Beatles, and even Slash, when he came last year, he also expressed his interest to have a sitar. So, any Indian musician you would like to collaborate with, if given a chance?
I mean, you know, one of the most amazing things I have is one of the most amazing gifts I have as a musician, and particularly now as a solo artist, is I can work with anyone, you know. And honestly, it's not something that's occurred to me, but I would love to. You know, I would love to. I mean, I think Indian music is extraordinary, and the whole approach to Indian music is something that seems to be, when it's done well, seems to be very successfully integrated with, you know, with kind of European pop music. You know, the example you gave, but also I can think of examples like Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. You know, for example, who doesn't love Led Zeppelin's Kashmir? So absolutely, I would love to. I must say, I'm not particularly familiar with specific Indian musicians, other than the most famous ones from the 60s, you know, and the 70s. But I'm sure there are some fabulous musicians out that I would love to be introduced to that side of things, for sure.
Nice. Stephen, my last question to you would be about your next, that is the 5th studio album. So what is the status on that, and what are you working on, and what's your upcoming plan?
I'm just finishing the writing process, which I've been writing for pretty much the last year, actually. And I'm going to start recording in December when I get back from India for the second time. I get back from India. I'm going to start recording in December, and it's very different to the last record, and it's very different to the last few records. It's more song based. I've written 19 songs, and that's all I'll say right now. That's all I'll say. I'm very excited about music. I always am excited about music. For me, it's always important to keep moving forwards, never go back, always move forwards, and that's what I'm trying to continue to do with this new record. So, yeah, so the status is writing finished, recording will begin probably closer to the end of the year.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen, for talking. I still can't believe that I spoke to you, being a fan of your music and being the fan of the man, and he's just over the phone on the other side. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you, and see you in India in a few weeks.
See you in Pune, yeah. I'll be there for your gig.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks, Wriddh.
Bye, Nidhi. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you.